So today we are here to talk about Georgia, specifically the two areas of Georgia which are known as Ossetia and Abkhazia. In 2008, a war broke out between Russia and Georgia. It's been a very contentious issue. There has been tremendous back and forth in terms of what the challenges are. The Georgians say that the Russians basically rolled in there, had a war, and have taken over these areas, while the Russians say they came to support the ethnicities of the Abkhazia and the Ossetias. And now, over the last few years, there has been a fence which has been built. Again, the Georgians accuse the Russians of violating an international agreement that they will not be interfering, but this fence has been built. They're also saying they have multiple posts of what formerly is called as the KGB, now known as the FSB, in those areas. So we went down to South Ossetia, and we did a little story around. We met a few refugees. We met a person who's still stuck on the other side of the line. So let's take a look at this story. And then we are joined with Emil. He's a Bulgarian journalist, and with Colonel Pillay, who is a defense analyst. He's based in New Delhi. We're going to talk to both of them. Emil has spent a considerable amount of time in Georgia and understands the whole landscape. Colonel Pillay has been a frontline war soldier, but beyond that, he's worked at the UN and he's worked at multiple other organizations. Today, he's an analyst. So we will come back to them, but let's start the show with a little story on the region. An eerie calm hangs at the conflict-torn ethnic regions of Georgia. The Russian forces have set up fences in the region. Even a slight altercation can tip the balance. It was in 2008 that more than 170 servicemen, 14 policemen, 228 civilians from Georgia were killed during the 5-day conflict between Georgia and Russia in 2008. The conflict centered on the South Ossetia and the Abkhazia regions. These two provinces in Georgia are supported by Russia. An accusation of a drone attack on the Georgians by the Russians led to the famous Russo-Georgian War. Russian troops started moving in, flying aircraft over Georgian capital, and airstrikes in South Ossetia made the situation worse. This war, even though it ended, worsened the relations between the countries and was also regarded as the first European war of the 21st century. Russia had largely destroyed Georgia's war-fighting machinery after the ceasefire. Russian troops attempted to seize and destroy Georgian armament, a process termed by the Moscow Defense Brief as the demilitarization of the Georgian armed forces. The war displaced 192,000 people, including both Ossetians and Georgians. Many were able to go back to their homes after the war, but a year later, around 30,000 ethnic Georgians are still uprooted. The 85-year-old man did not leave his home during the attacks. When he woke up in the morning, this barbed wire fence had been erected, leaving his daughter and her child on the other side of the territory, still under control of the Georgian government. Whenever he spots people or troops coming towards the fence, he greets them. He hopes one day this fence would be gone and he can then reunite and continue leading his life with his extended family.
People who are today divided by the artificial barriers, such as barbed wire fences, which are erected there by the occupation regime. 20% of Georgia's territories are occupied today by Russia. These are two regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Around 300,000 people, which means more than half of the population of these two regions, are in exile. These are ethnic Georgians. There are other people, around 200,000 people, who remain behind these barbed wires of different ethnicities, mostly Abkhazians and Ossetians.
Refugee Naira Javishvili remembers each minute of the day when they had to flee. They picked up whatever they could as they left. The recurrent bombing and the inferno that took place as she left her hometown haunts her till this day. She now lives in a refugee accommodation provided by the Georgian government, not far from where the fence has been erected.
საფრთხე იყო ტრიძალის შემოჭრისა სოფელში. აქვე უნდა აღვნიშნო, რომ ჩვენსა და ოსურ სოფლებს შორის განყოფი ხაზი არ არსებობდა. არსებობდა მხოლოდ სავალი გზა, სავალი ბილიკები. ერთადერთი გასასვლელი გზა, რომ თავი დაგვიღწია მტრისაგან, ეს იყო ქართლისკენ მომავალი გზა, გორისკენ მომავალი გზა, რომელიც ისე სახიფათო იყო, მაგრამ მაინც საიმედო იყო ჩვენთვის. მოგეხსენებათ ახალბად გაითვალისწინებთ, თუ როგორი განლაგება იყო და როგორი იყო ჩვენი მდგომარეობა. ამ სამივე სოფელში უკვე ჯარისკაცები იყვნენ. ისმოდა სროლის ხმები, აფეთქებები. ჩვენს იქ ყოფნის დროს, სანამ მასიურად განადგურდებოდა სოფელი, რამდენიმე ბინა დაიწყა. ჩამოვარდა ყუმბარები, ცია, ანუ ეს ჩვენი მტერი რუსეთი ასე გაიმეტებდა ქართლის ამ მშვენიერ სოფელს.
Georgia and Ukraine have been conceding to join the NATO and also allying themselves with Western ideas is something that the Russians see as the installation of a puppet government in Georgia, whereas the Georgians realize that they have a puppet government in Abkhazia and Ossetia.
The devastating war pushed EU foreign ministers to authorize 300-strong observer mission to replace Russian troops in the buffer zone. There are still disagreements going on about where exactly the EU observers will be allowed to go and how many soldiers will remain in the Abkhazia and the South Ossetia region. The threat of Russian incursions looms large in these Georgian villages. What the Georgians describe it as is a creeping occupation. Now what Georgia is hoping, that Russia will stop making its incursions and stand by its international promise and withdraw entirely from its territory. I'm Rohit Gandhi in Georgia and Kurvaleti, reporting for Democracy News Live. So when I was in Georgia a few months ago, the EU mission was held by the Russian side, and they were held for many hours before they were released. In fact, their pictures were taken and those were also released on social media. So it created quite a furore there. And there have been challenges around the whole EU mission and what Russia will do and what it won't do. There have been tremendous, photos floating around. There's a lot of back and forth. To the rest of the world, the picture is not clear because the access to the South Ossetia side and the Abkhazian side is not there. But on the Georgian side, obviously, the Georgians take you up to the border and they make you meet people on their side. So not enough information available. And let's go down now and talk to our two experts today. Emil's been on the front lines there. He has spent a tremendous amount of time there. He joins me from Bulgaria. He's in Sofia today. And also joining me is Colonel DPK Pillai. He's a frontline soldier. He spent many years in the Indian Army. Today, he's in Delhi and he works for a think tank. And he's going to tell us a bit about his perspective and the Russian side of how they look at this. So let me start with Emil. Emil, you've been on the ground. Tell us, what is your perspective on what the Russians are doing in that buffer zone? And tell me your perspective around the idea of the Georgians and their relationship with the Ossetians, South Ossetians and the Abkhazians.
Hello to everybody of your viewers. Hello from Bulgaria, Europe, close from you from COVID-19. Actually, first of all, I want to point that there is no line because there is no war now in Georgia. I've been for the first time in Georgia 2000, and before the reforms, before Georgia turns to Europe and NATO, and it is very important because I can make the to compare the two sides of Georgia when it was in Russian influence and then when Georgia was and it is independent. Georgia now is European country in all matters. No, actually, it's one of the no corrupted countries in the world. I think there is no criminality at all. And 2020 years ago, when I went there, it could take you off the street, they can kidnap you, they can do everything what you think. But now, when I lived 2 years in Georgia, it's so safety that I never been safety in the world. United States, Europe, Italy, whatever you mean it. So for me, it's very important something. This is the point of everything. Georgia needs its independence. The country needs own way to development and Europe and European standards of living, and this is NATO, European Union, and Georgia deserves this because Georgia made a lot of reforms, a lot of things to do it, and the point is Russia never let this happen.
And this is one of the things that the Georgians, when they reached out to me, they talked about. They said, today, none of our police is corrupt, which is a big deal. So if you travel around Central Asia, whether it is Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, you can be pulled over anytime. And the cops have their hands out, they're asking for money, they're troubling you. But the Georgians said, we'd fix that. And two, we've gone from being in our old mode, we've gone to becoming a country which is thriving on entrepreneurship and the ideas of innovation. We want to move away from that whole idea of Central Asia, where it's going to be a challenge to exist. And we want to make that move. But the challenge of having Russia right next door, and the war may not be on, but each time I spoke with Georgians, they talked about how the threat was still looming. They weren't sure when things could change all of a sudden. And I think that's something which is a challenge. Let me go to Colonel Pillay. Let me bring him into this discussion. Colonel Pillay, even in the story when we interviewed you, you talked about how Russia, when it looks at Georgia and sees that it might be interested and is interested in joining the NATO, it may be a big challenge for Russia because it's right on its boundary, right on its borders, and it is a big challenge for Russia to see a NATO ally right in there.
It's but obvious that the NATO was created with the intention of tackling the Eastern Bloc, and Russia presently has inherited that status. So it's pretty obvious that they wouldn't like to have an alliance right at their door, and they do have existential problems with peace accords. These are inherited from the erstwhile Soviet Union. The issue of Abkhazia and Georgia, the territories of South Ossetia, which has declared independence, also remain as sore. May not be actively hostile, war may not be going on, but these are frozen conflicts which have not found an end.
Emil, tell me a bit about when you look at the Ossetians and the Abkhazians. From their perspective, is this an ethnic war from them? Do they want to get away from Georgia? Explain that situation to me.
Yeah, it's totally different between South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Abkhazia is something different. There is a very nice movie I recommend to all your viewers, which is called The World of Mandarins, which is the famous Georgian movie about how friends start kill each other. Because during the Soviet time, it was in an empire. I can make a relation to empire in India when everybody lived together. nobody, there was no ethnic tensions, no wars, nothing. People believe in Allah or God or whatever you want, and they live together, collecting mandarins, and so in the end, the Russian Empire collapsed. Oh, for me, the problem is when an empire collapses, and Russian Empire look. This is the point. First, Russia is a royal empire during the Peter the Great and Katerina the Great. Everybody is the great in Russia. So then is Soviet Empire. It doesn't matter if Soviet, Communist, Royal or Putin Empire. It is empire. So there is a little gaps when empires are weak, and in that time, each of the people of the Russian Empire start to make own schedule of living, independence, own culture, everything. And Georgia started as well as many countries in the Soviet Empire. And Abkhazia was plenty of people, like ancient peoples, Abkhazians, Georgians, Russians, Ukrainians, Moldovians, everybody. And the war started because of some nationalist pretensions. So it's this, but the South Ossetia is something different. That's the last step that Georgia left. In South Ossetia was artificial in the beginning. There is an alliance in the North Ossetia. The ancient people as are Iranian and Hindu European, so they are really, really a big people and with history and things like this. But Stalin times and the communist times, it always is like this. You know it very well in India. Divide and conquer. So they took territory of Georgia and put some administrative things like this is South Ossetia. It doesn't matter. We are the same communist state, Soviet Union. Everybody is equal. It doesn't matter. But it happens also in Azerbaijan, in Armenia. So you know that in Armenia there is one village which is Azerbaijani territory, but it doesn't matter. Administratively, it's connected to Azerbaijan, but it's in Armenia. So this is how the empires do it. They conquer and divide. So they put these two because for Russia, Georgia is important as a strategic platform. This is the way to Black Sea, Hot Sea, to Turkey, to Iran, to Armenia, to Azerbaijan, and that's why I think Mr. Saakashvili made a lot of good things for Georgia. Actually, Saakashvili made all the reforms. In the second half of his ruling, he made a lot of mistakes, and one of the biggest mistakes is to provoke the war with Russia. And Russia, it was a trap for Georgians just to make this platform. Now in South Ossetia, it's happening nothing. People cannot even make any supplies from Russia, nothing. But there is a lot of security services there, and I'm not happy what happens there in South Ossetia.
Now, let's talk a bit about the UN mission. Colonel Pillay, the EU, your mission has come under tremendous pressure. The EU has time and again raised it and said, let's make sure that there is peace. We do not conflagrate this, and everybody kind of falls in their areas and not really mess around with the whole idea. But somehow it has not happened so far. It's things have conflagrated every now and then, and there has been a challenge. Uh, Explain to me, how much of a responsibility do Russians have to make sure that things fall in line?
See, Russians have an argument
the way the world has rushed to recognize Kosovo's breakaway from Serbia, and they recognize the right of the other countries to declare independence, in which they feel that they are not. So, as far as the UN, the team that has been deployed and the fighting that is taking place, the mandate has not been. uh, I really don't see how they can actually implement the mandate in view. In fact, the states had agreed that not more than Russia would be present in all these regions that are there. Kind of like I see in our own issue of Kashmir. Now, I really doubt the ability of United Nations to play a ability of being a mediator. Cease to recognize UNIMOGIP, and the validity of the mission in Kashmir has been challenged by us. In fact, we've even gone back on providing assistance to the mission in Jammu and Kashmir. So I really don't see any in the they recognize that it is moving beyond Southeast Asia, and I don't think that the UN or the OSCE have an ability currently. Now, if you look at it, it's not in a position to find a solution.
You make a very good point, Colonel Pillai. You make an extremely good point. Now, let's talk about a bit about Kashmir. Um Kashmir in itself is one of those issues where we're talking about a Muslim majority wanting a Muslim state, so to exist outside the Indian Union. Um, but in this case, it is these ethnic minorities. The Georgians obviously saying that they don't want to be separate. It's because of the Russian interference that they've kind of made them split. Then on the other end is Ukraine, where a similar situation came up. So I want to get a sense of whether the historical, claimability on that land is Georgian or not. Similarly in Ukraine. Emil, if you can weigh in a bit around, you know, comparing, and I know it's comparisons are always poor, but if you can compare the
In
Ukraine
former Soviet,
situation, I'm going to let Emil come in on this. Compare Ukraine crises and the Georgian crisis.
It is the same. Actually, it is pretension of the Russian Empire, which is now Putin's empire. But so, it's I told you, it's a Royal Empire, Soviet Empire, Putin Empire. It doesn't matter. Next empire emperor will be the next. But the pretension is that that's. It's Russian territory. It's a Russian empire because in Russia they live more than like in India, many peoples and live together. But it's Russia never been a democracy, never been a real democracy, and I think that it starts back in the years with history that Russia pretends that they protect the Georgian Orthodox people from the Muslims, and when they make the contracts back in 200 years, and the next steps of Russia was you give up, you never have a king, you will be a viceroy. So, but Georgia has this kind of independency during the Russian Empire, but never Georgia never itself was allowed to join Europe. But Georgia is one of the oldest country in the world. You can imagine it's oldest like India.
4,000
Russia
years.
exists like 1,000 and more years. So Georgia is the oldest than it Georgia deserves to be independent and to cut these relations political in Russia, and then a Russian and Georgian not on the political level. In Georgia, they love Russians because they come in Georgia. They are the biggest can speak one language, but they don't like Putin at all.
So we have to remember that also when Russia was having issues with Chechnya, the Georgians supported Russia
No,
in the war.
itself because it wasn't the war of Georgia, and they have a minority in this northern part, which is the Pankisi Valley, where it's a Chechen minority. It was very easy. Georgia has a problem with everybody, with Armenia, with Azerbaijan, with Turkey, with Russia, with Chechens, everybody. So they didn't to off in this war. So and Georgia was sick in that time. And do not forget that the president at that time was the the biggest minister of foreign affairs of Soviet Union, Shevardnadze. Edward
Absolutely.
Shevardnadze. He was mind union, one like a Stalin, like Beria. So he was even they built a statue which is Mother Georgia looking to Russia and Georgia on this time. So they didn't want to mess with this because it was a big war. After Shevardnadze, everything changed. Georgia very, very fast came up a very democratic and very developed country without corruption, with policemen that they are not corrupted, never
Great.
corrupted.
Great. All right. So, closing thoughts from you, Colonel Pillay, on the situation and what needs to be done to find the peace.
I believe that this will remain a frozen conflict. If you look at the history of Ossetians, it only became a part of the Russian Empire around 1700, 1775 or late 1700s, and then under the Treaty Russian Empire 22 it was divided, and then again you had this issue in 1990, the last days of the empire, of the not the empire, the communist regime, USSR. So you had this, it detached itself, and there were a lot of ethnic tensions. So if you haven't had a solution in the last 250 years, I don't foresee in our lifetime that we're going to find a solution to this problem. And what is to be understood is that while we may contest sovereignty and other things, what should happen is this shouldn't really affect like what Ellen had been saying about it. Like India is a great example about how people have learned to coexist and multi-religions, multi-faith, and everyone. Our business goes on as usual. It has made certain compromise take from India is we have conflicts, but those conflicts don't impede progress that our country has made. We had differences and we had separatist movements in Manipur, Nagaland, Assam, Punjab, Kashmir. Yet business, and it's like a long drawn process. So it's really not like bombing them back to the Middle Ages or whatever. It goes hand in hand, and that is the story of human civilization. We've actually progressed. Conflict. There's never going to be an Ethiopian state where everyone recognizes one central authority and now that we all bought the Putin Empire, or there's never been an empire in the world where all people's allegiance have been won. So I
Sure.
think the takeaway that you can have is to understand that take a lesson from India to understand how in conflict you can coexist. We had former chief ministers, former militant leaders, underground leaders becoming chief ministers of our state. So we mainstreamed.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. Closing thoughts, Emil, on where do you see this conflict coming down? Do you see finding peace, people backing off from their positions, and us living in a better world, at least there?
The only way of Georgia is European Union and NATO, and that's the out of the conflict. There is no other resolution of this conflict, and of course they'll need all countries, Russia and Georgia, to step back and make, like, say, South Ossetia, maybe. I don't know. It doesn't work for me, but one of the ways to make Abkhazia and Ossetia step back to Georgia, like autonomy or something like this. But you don't know, in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, people doesn't live better than in Georgia. So they try to go in Georgia to educate there and to shopping, to heal them, but Russians stop them. So I think this is the Abkhazia and South Ossetia should go back to Georgia. That's it. And
Thank you, Emil, for joining me for the show. And thank you very much, Colonel Pillay, for joining me for this show. I think the idea and that we are been talking about globally is to find peace. I think communication around finding peaceful resolutions to conflicts, they're never easy, they take a long time. But we as journalists should go out and not try and conflagrate these conflicts, but try and at least bring some understanding. Because at the end of the day, we as humanity are looking for peace. We're not looking for more war, or we're not looking for, creating a much more worse situation. So as long as nations understand that we need to find peace, sometimes we got to give some, sometimes we got to take some, but finding that peace is the most important thing. So continue watching Democracy News Live. We have our Facebook channels, our YouTube channels, and our Twitter channels on Periscope. So please continue watching us and continue following us. We try and be as neutral as possible, as objective as possible. We don't take sides. We don't slam countries for no reason at all, but we try and bring some perspective. And thank you, Emil, again, and thank you to Kamal Pillay again for joining me for this discussion.